right? So we are going to look at NodeSelector. And this feature is used to schedule pods on a specific node, right? So what you do is first you label the node, and then you specify in your manifest file where you want the pod to go, right? You specify inside it whatever matches this label that you match in this particular node. That's what you want. So let's look at, say for instance, you have some applications. So let's look at one use case. Let's say you have an application, let's say one first use case, and the application, you want it to be in a particular node. This is your pod, which contains your application. And the node, you want it to have, maybe the node has a quality or feature of SSD, right? The storage is SSD. And you want the application to always be very fast, right? So that particular pod, let's call it pod A, you want it to come to this node, let's say node 1. All you need to do is label this node, right? Label it, you can label it with something like disktype, is SSD, and specify in your manifest file this label. Anywhere it sees this on any node, is going to automatically bring it on this node, the node with the label, right? That's one. And again, you can do it, let's say for instance, you have another node, let's call this node B, and you want it to always have stateful applications, probably like a database or something like Elasticsearch, right? They are stateful sets. You don't want, they have fixed, you want them to have fixed IPs, because when they restart in Kubernetes, everything is going to be gone. So you want it to have fixed IP, so it doesn't turn on and off at every time, right? And that way you can actually label the node and put the matching label specification in the manifest file. And once you do that, it will automatically come to this node B, right? So let's say this are same use case. Then another use case that you may want to look at is, say for instance, you have a gaming application, right? You have a gaming application in a specific pod, right? And you want to use some form of architecture. Maybe you want to use NVIDIA architecture, right? And because you want it to be very fast, gaming consumes resources, and this node have very high, maybe very high CPU, maybe like 16 cores, 64, right? You want it to come here, right? You just label it. You label it with label the node, and then specify in your pod manifest file the matching label. So automatically it will come to this place. That's number 2. And again, for instance, maybe you have pods that doesn't consume much resources, right? Or you want it to be specified on a node that is not really that expensive. For instance, in AWS, you have the ARM64s, right? Amazon, that doesn't actually cost much. You just, the application, the pod in this request, right? You just want it. It can take ARM64, or it's the architecture that is using is ARM64. Can bring it to this, and you can just say label this node as probably ARC64, and put in the manifest file that the pod should match the label. Once it matches the label, it will bring it here as well, right? So those are some of the things you can use NodeSelector to actually do, right? There are many other use cases, like you can allow it to be something like go to a particular availability zone, in your cloud, maybe US East 1, right? You can do that. And in fact, you can label wherever you label a node with probably environment tagging, right? You can do that, and your pod will go to all those all those nodes. So let us see that in action. So the first thing I want to do is I want to say kind get clusters, right? And once we do kind get clusters, you see this, and I'll say kubectl get nodes. And of course, you can see that we have our control plane at 3. So let's go to the source of truth, and I'm going to say Google. I'm going to say, Google Chrome. And let's open Google Chrome. And I'm going to say google.com. I'm going to say a sec. All right, just because of time. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to do something. I'm going to label our node first. So I'm going to label this mini cluster worker, right? And I'm going to specify a pod that will go particularly to this. Now, if you look at this, let me say kubectl get nodes, and it's saying my control plane is not ready, but not to worry. Even if it's not ready, we can always use the worker nodes, and those are the ones that we need. So if you see this, don't worry about it, right? We have 3 clusters, which is part of why we are using this. It's still highly available, right? So great. I'm going to say kubectl label, and I'm going to say nodes, and this node I want to load is mini cluster worker, and it should be like this, worker. And from there I'm going to say disk type, right? Where I want my pod to go, I want it to have a disk type of SSD. So if we've written all that right, so let's go to the, let's say kubectl, let's say NodeSelector, let's say label node exactly to get everything. So if we come here, we're going to see this is the source of truth, and if you see it, this is pods, but what we want to label is nodes, right? Let's come here, this is pods, and I'm going to come here, go back, open it. I'm going to say, okay, yes, label node. That's what's supposed to give us. Assign pods to nodes here. This first one. I'm going to come here, get node showed labels, and this is it right here. See, kubectl label nodes, my node name, disk type equals to SSD. So if we come here and we just do this, let's change it to equal to SSD, right? And that's why it's always good to go to the documentation, and I will say enter. Great. And it's telling me that it has been labeled. And if we go back to our source of truth, and we can get the label. So if I say kubectl get nodes show labels, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say kubectl show get nodes, right? Get nodes show labels. And let's see whatever we've written if it's correct. Right? Show labels, right? And now we are going to see the labels. And if you look at our this one mini cluster, we should see a new label called disk type is SSD, and there's no other one that have that. So with that being said, now let's create, now that we've labeled our cluster, let's create a pod, right? We'll create it in the manifest file, create it, and then we have to select use NodeSelector to match this particular label, right? So if we say kubectl get ports, right? You can see there is no port in the namespace. So for instance, before we do this, first thing I want to do is I want to, okay, no worries. Let me just use make directory. I'll say make directory, managing ports. And I'm going to go into that managing port, and I'm going to say vim 00 node selector 1 dot YAML, right? And this is how you write the manifest file. And I'm going to say API version I want to use is v1. And don't forget, come here, be like me, API version. And the kind of object that I want to create is port. Kind is port, capital P. And the name, so let me say metadata, and the name of the pod, right? So it's going to be Nginx container, right? And we are going to say specification, which is where we'll specify everything that we want to do, everything. So I'm going to say, yes, NodeSelector, right? I'm going to say NodeSelector, and I'm going to come here, I'm going to say disktype. And I'm going to say here SSD, right? Disktype SSD. So now this is what is going to select that node, right? And wherever this thing, wherever node it sees this, that's where this Nginx container is going to go to, right? So let me do this, and I'm going to say containers. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say name of this is going to be, let me say my container. That's the name of that container. And I'm going to say the image should be Nginx, right? Now, for this, I just want to tell you we are not concerned about whether this container runs or not. We are just concerned about which node it goes to, right? We are not concerned about whether we expose it or whether we look at it on localhost. No, we are just concerned about where it goes to, right? So let's do this, and I'm going to save this, right? So I say escape, and I'm going to save this, and we'll say kubectl apply, and if we've written everything the right way, and we're going to say 00 NodeSelector. And once we do this, and it's saying purge Nginx as created. So if I say kubectl get purge, I'm going to say whole wide to see more information about it. And if you see this, it's saying Nginx container. Container is creating, and if you look at this, it's saying the mini cluster worker, which is where we want it to go. That's where it went, right? This is how you can do that. So let's do another example for you to understand that this is what is going to happen. So for instance, I'm going to say vim 00 node selector. This is another one. Selector, I'm going to say 1, okay, let me say 2.yaml, right? And I'm going to create another one, right? And this one, we are going to make it to go to another node instead, right? So let's first write our manifest file. So I'm going to say API version, and the API version is going to be v1. And now the kind is going to be pod, right? And metadata, I'm going to say metadata, and I'm going to give the pod a name, and I'm going to say this name this time. What we are going to get is a Mongo container, which is a database, right? And we want this database to be in another node, right? And so we want to separate them. So I'm going to say specification, and I'm going to say NodeSelector And I'm right here, I'm going to say DB. Let me just say application is what? DB. This is what I'm going to say. Application is DB. So let me do it this way. Yeah, there has to be space. Please be very careful, because these things cares about how everything is being arranged, which is this YAML manifest file that we're using. So I'm going to say containers, right? Containers. I'm going to say the name of that container is MongoDB, and the image is going to be Mongo, right? Which is the name of MongoDB database. So let's check everything. NodeSelector, app is DB, and we are going to save this. We are going to say escape, and we are going to say save it, right? Now what we have not done is that we did for this one is we need to label this pod as well, right? We need to label this pod, and this node. I'm going to say kubectl label node. So which node should we use? All right, let's use the third node. So I'm going, before we do that, let's say kubectl get nodes. And once we've done that, we will use mini cluster worker 3, right? And let's label that. We're going to say kubectl label nodes. And which node do we want? Mini cluster worker 3. That's what we want to label. And this time what we want to say, app is DB. That's the label we want to give it. App is DB, right? If we've written everything well, labeling this node, right? Calling it, saying app. So if we do this, and it's saying at least one label is required. So let's go here and don't put space. And it's saying update is required. So let's see what we've written that is not right. Let me see, mini cluster. Oh, okay, my bad. And it's not supposed to be this. It's supposed to be like this, equal to, right? App equal to DB, right? I'm going to press enter, and it has been labeled. So if we say kubectl get nodes, and let's say show labels, right? We should see that our mini cluster 3 should have this app DB label, right? And now that's where we want our this new one that we've written to go to, which is the second one of this, which is the Mongo. So with that being said, let's do what? Let's apply. Let's say kubectl apply -f OC00, and this is going to be 2. Don't forget, the first one is 1, and the second one is going to be 2, right? If we've written everything right, we'll say enter, and it has created it. So if we say kubectl get pods all wide, right, then this Nginx container is running. And if you look at this, right, this one is worker, and this new one is where? Worker 3. So this way you are able to separate your pods, or even if it's deployment, into different nodes according to the specifications, the features, or the use case itself. So that's it about it.